We have three live speakers. We're delighted to have with us today Diana Umpierre, Will Friedberg, and Avalon Owens. I'll introduce them one by one, starting with Diana Umpierre, who has 25 years of experience in urban planning and geography and geoscience. She's got a bachelor's from Cornell in geology, but she's also a certified planner and GIS professional. She has she's a past president of the International Dark Sky Association, and she is currently on the board of the IDA. She is calling in today from Florida, where she is a staff member of the Sierra Club, Florida, and works closely with other parts of Sierra Club and as a community grassroots activist on numerous conservation issues, not all of them, but many of them tied to dark skies. So you can see she has a deep, rich history of conservation activism, and her talk today is about growing a transformational movement for our night sky. Diana, thank you so much for joining us today, and we're ready to hear from you, and you can share screen whenever you like.
Okay. All right, great. Well, thank you so much, everybody. Let me see if I do this right. Give me 1 second. Screen number 2. No, screen number 1. Okay. And you let me know when you see it, because I have no way of knowing what you see.
We see it. Perfect.
You see it good? Okay, good. You know, the one thing that I don't know if you know how to do it. There's this bar that shows up on the top when you're sharing your screen. Do you know how to get rid of it?
Yes, click the 3 dots and ask it to, there should be an option to hide the menu options or something like that.
Oh, like video panel maybe?
Yeah, so I don't know.
No, that one didn't do it. Hide floating meeting controls. Okay, I got it now.
Good.
Okay, sounds good. So, okay, well, so let me, I did something that now I don't see the faces, but you guys can all see me, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, all right, good, okay. All right, sounds good. So, okay, so what I'm going to try to do, and as fast as I can, because I'm always guilty of putting more slides and doing things at the last minute. But what I wanted to share, and I'm sharing what I've shared today. I'm not sharing it as an IDA person. I'm not sharing it as a Sierra Club person. I'm sharing it just as a regular citizen that knew nothing about light pollution several years ago. And then something snapped, as I call it, and I just can't let it go ever since then. And so part of what I'm going to share is a little bit of how that started and how it has led me to this understanding of how the incredible need that there is to grow the movement so that it is beyond the work of one main organization. And some of it draws, some of it from the work that I do with Sierra Club, which, as you know, it works on a lot of different kinds of issues. So my journey began on Christmas Day on 2011, when my son gave me a telescope, which, by the way, that telescope is really a decoration right now in my living room because it's pretty difficult to use. It was an Astromaster 114 EQ, and God willing, in a few weeks, I hear that I will be getting a Dob. So I'm actually excited to actually be getting a Dob. It will be much easier to use. But so when I got the telescope, you know, I joined a local astronomy club, and of course I wanted to go out and enjoy my new toy. And what I started finding out is that, you know, I had to go basically into the Everglades to be able to enjoy this new toy. And it was through working with the local astronomy club that I started learning about this issue on light pollution. And the more I learned about it, of course, the more concerned I became. At the time, I had just left working for a state agency that owns a lot of land in the Everglades for water management purposes. And so I had some connections with them. And one of the things that I found out, it was just how difficult it is to get access to the night sky late at night, for people who like astronomy and astrophotography and so forth. So some of my early work was related to trying to make sure we got the permits that we needed in order to do these activities late at night. Since then, really my understanding of what light pollution is so much broader. It's really like at this point, issues about losing the stars have become like the smaller component of the bigger things that I worry about. We know, as some of you said, that it wastes a lot of money. This is, a view from the Everglades. I'm going to go through this quickly. We had an opportunity to have Shad Moore, who some of you know, that came down with some other team members, and they did these images of the night sky in Florida, and you could see, if you're in a place like Dry Tortugas in the westernmost part of the Florida Keys, you can still see magnificent things such as the zodiacal light in Milky Way. As you start getting inland, Big Cypress, where I really spend most of my night sky time, I can still see the Milky Way, but certainly, we have the dooms out there. And as you get closer and closer to the Miami area, of course, it gets worse. And this is really what really drew my concern, is when I started realizing the effect that light pollution was having on wildlife, because at the end, none of them have curtains at night. And so, fireflies, I have, in Puerto Rico, where I grew up, we have this type of insect. It's not quite a firefly, but we call it a cucubano. And that's what I grew up in, seeing these little firefly-like insects all over the place. And now it's really hard to see them. And then the other thing that, I started then getting, of course, I learned about IDA and I joined. I started then working on getting Big Cypress National Preserve designated as a place, and embark on this journey to contact people, contact the superintendent of the park at the time. Long story short, I, once we got a lot of people, more people engaged, we even got one of the commissioners for Collier County, where Big Cypress is, on board, once he found out about this designation we're working on. And I remember back in 2014, when I first met him, he says, well, if you get me this poster, and this is this poster that you see over here, I'll make sure that when I'm mayor, because the mayor's there, the commissioners take turns being mayors, that he was going to bring something forth to protect the night skies. And sure enough, about 1 month after Big Cypress got designated, he kind of started the process, with doing at least lighting standards for the county infrastructure itself. So 2016 came around, we were able to get Big Cypress designated. And in fact, it was the first National Park Service unit designated east of Colorado. Earlier this year, I was really thrilled when the Everglades Coalition gave me an award, and actually on the award, they actually put the night sky in there. And you can probably guess that the reason what ended up in there is because just about everything I do, I just can't help but mention this passion for the night sky and constantly trying to relate that to all this other work. Now, through all of these things, one of the things, I'm not going to talk to you about any technical stuff today. Other people can do that way better than me. I'm going to just share my passion that I have right now for mobilizing people, for believing that once we have lots of organizations and lots of people engaged, that there's shared ownership and shared engagement, that we're really going to see a much bigger movement. And we're going to see bills as the ones that you're trying to pass, hopefully take a whole lot less time for those things to happen. So to me, this is the most important thing. We could go on about all the technical things, that are needed to tackle light pollution. But to me, if you don't have people engaged and passionate and speaking up and doing everything they can, and using all kinds of tactics, it's going to be small successes. So thankfully, when I started with Sierra Club, one of the opportunities that I had is to try to find ways to bring in the night sky and the light pollution stuff into the work that I was already doing on other issues, which include Everglades restoration, climate change, as well as other issues. So here you see some of these, me doing my thing. What you see, for example, on the top left and bottom, it's that was the People's Climate March event that we get, and you know, I said X is artificial line, ruins our climate, you know, and I went and I printed it out, got a bunch of people to hold those signs and get educated on the issue. IDA itself also got engaged and created also some maps, like turn out the lights, you know, so that we can turn off the night. These other pictures that you see in there was something that was really dear to me. Forgot exactly when it was. It was this thing called the Zero Summit, 0 Hour Summit, which was involved kids from all over the United States. It was held in Miami. The fellow that you see on the lower right, he's one of them, like really excited when I met him. He's from Uganda. A young man that is doing some amazing things out in Uganda, and really got like really excited to talk about dark skies. On the top, right, you see some people that are amazing. This little boy that you see in the middle with the big fuzzy hair, and the lady that you see on the right, who's the daughter of a friend of mine. They're all involved in a lawsuit to basically, you know, I guess it didn't go as far as we hoped it would, but basically they were suing the government, you know, saying you're not taking the climate crisis seriously enough, and it sacrifices their future. So these, like, you know, part of the things, you know, I've gone down, you know, for example, there was a March for Science out there, and went out with signs and got a bunch of people to like hold the signs and get educated on the issue, just so that we can bring more people into see the connections between the protection of the night sky and climate change and a lot of other issues that people care about and mobilize on. The other things that, you know, I try doing is on my end is realizing that to protect the night sky, you have to also protect the lands. In fact, most of the dark sky areas that we still have in Florida is because we have conservation areas that were protected with public funds. And so part of what we did is join hands with a lot of other groups. And this is a very bipartisan group that you see right here. This lady on the left, she's actually a cattle rancher who hasn't always sided with us on many things, but there we are together saying that we need to get more funding for a program that allows us to get more land for conservation purposes. And you know, there we were holding signs about the night sky, you know, and we brought in the story. It's that, you know, that we protect our land, we are able to also protect our night sky. One of the things that we also did is we started just joining with lots of coalitions. I forgot, I think we're close to 100 or so different organizations that are fighting fiercely on, there's a push right now by the Florida Chamber of Commerce and some other groups. They were successful in passing a legislation that, you know, to attempt to speed their way through and kind of skip a lot of planning related processes to put in like close to 300 new miles of highways through what's, you know, some of the darkest areas and rural areas that we have in Florida. And you can kind of see the margin of some of these areas that would be harmed. And, you know, the issue with this particular thing that it is called MCORS, which we call, you know, roads to ruin, is that it's really not intended to deal with congestion. It's really a mechanism for actually increasing sprawl. So this graphic that you see on the left, that was one that I made, you know, when we were in the battle on the bill, and we ended up giving it to reporters. That ended up being, you know, a big thing. And again, I'm using that as an example of how we started merging, intersecting all these different fights that we had together. Earlier this year, was before the pandemic started, we went out to Washington, D.C. To a hearing to protect, if I can remember the initials right, the National Environmental Protection, I'm sure I got one letter wrong somewhere in there. act, but basically it's a very important federal law that allows us to make sure that projects that receive federal funding get these, thorough environmental reviews. And it's been under attack. And we went out with lots of different people, different organizations that you see in here. On the lower right, for example, you see the Defenders of Wildlife CEO speaking on this here. You see Colin, got his last name. He's with the National Wildlife Federation. And one of the things we did when we were in Washington, D.C. is we got the opportunity to meet with some of the Congress people to share our concerns about NEPA, rollbacks on NEPA. And my funnest meeting was the one that we had with the legislative aide for Francis Rooney, a representative. Because when he saw me, he actually was present during the award ceremony where I got my my Everglades Coalition Award. So we ended up spending a big chunk of our meeting with him, talking about night skies and light pollution, and how bridging the gap of why this law is actually really even important for dealing with lighting. Again, for those of you that know me, I waste no time like making sure that I use every opportunity I can to build bridges. I think on the top right, some of you might recall Governor Inslee. And the things that I'm holding in my hand is basically IDA brochures about sky glow and a little thing about the street lights. I forgot what it's called. Anyway, hopefully I have a picture, but it's this thing about the advice from the street light, I think it is. So we gave that to the governor, and then Ian McCarty, who some of you know, and again, she got the lecture over the night sky. Then, within Sierra Club, having the opportunity to work with them, I've been working with them and a few other groups. For example, I know that the New Jersey group is very much interested in this issue as well. And we started, working on tackling this. One of the things we did, we created some add-up actions that you can find, in that link that is there. To basically anybody who takes that action would email their mayor, anywhere in the United States, and make certain recommendations, which, if you go in there, you'll see what they are, but they include, kind of high level from, all the things that are, part of these so-called 5 principles and, and a little bit more to push the envelope on that. We've gotten like close to 2,500 or so, maybe a little more than that. I also created this, which is not very active right now, but hopefully it will be active in the near future. And the part that is really thrilling, that I'm happy to say, is that even though Sierra Club had a light pollution national policy that is literally almost 50 years old and was in place like even 17 years or so before IDA itself was founded, it needed a major update. And it just passed its first committee at the national level, and it's going to go out now to all the Sierra Club staff and members for a 60-day review, and hopefully it'll get passed. And the reason why, all those things, what I've learned is the importance of thinking of what we're doing, of really approaching it from a movement building perspective. When, in movement building, and this is just some of the language that helps to describe what do we mean by that. And it's basically a type of organizing effort where you share common interests, obviously common interests with a lot of people, and you basically collectively build and use power to advance that common goal. We each contribute to the movement. Nobody, one organization owns the movement. So we all contribute based on, our capacities and the circles of influence that we have and the skill sets that we have. And we collaborate in order to advance those movement goals. Movements are mainly successful when they're particularly led by the people that are most harmed by the status quo. When they go beyond an organization, when they realize that you're going to need to sustain it, have some common narratives, and that this is a long-term commitment to change. They help to solve problems that are bigger than one organization, bigger than IDA's mission, bigger than Sierra Club's missions. And they expand the vision, basically about what we're going and what we're, and they're sharing that responsibility. Again, we all then share different things to the movement. Within Sierra Club, these are kind of the different things that we kind of help to bring in. Movement moments, is typically the phrase that we use to describe, you're in this long-term journey to mobilize people, to get this narrative that, that our climate is important, that we all own it and need to do what we can to stabilize it. And so along the way, there's these movement moments. There's these moments where lots of people get mobilized, whether at people climate marches, whether it's, March for Science and a bunch of other things, such as what has been going on throughout the summer with people that, are experiencing systemic racism. So those are all moments, but there really is bigger, it's a part of a much bigger thing where you're trying to transform thinking. Now, so wanted to mention real quick, pivot to why is it that it's really important that we embrace equity, justice, and inclusion issues in movement building, including dark sky, night sky protection. One of my favorite quotes by Audre Lorde, if I say her name right, is there's no such thing as a single issue struggle because we do not live single issue lives. There are articles out there, I can share this afterwards, but one of the things, even though light pollution affects us all, regardless of income and where we live and all of those things, the fact is that both the access to night sky, both the inability to buy good quality lighting, and having equitable, it doesn't happen the same for all communities. In Miami, where I live, I don't live in Miami, I live very close to it, and I'm in Pembroke Pines in Broward. We have communities that literally lighting has become a form of policing for them. And so that awareness has also increased, just how, light pollution needs to, just like water pollution and air pollution tend to more negatively impact some parts of society more than others, so it is with light pollution. And to give that illustration of that, I'm sharing, as a Puerto Rican, I was there in August of 2017 for basically a light pollution conference, Simposio de la Contaminación Lumínica. There were like over 300 people that were there. It was actually led by the government in Puerto Rico. We were all excited. I was so excited meeting all these people that were there. This again, August 2017. A month later, Puerto Rico gets hit by Irma and it gets by Maria. And Maria, of course, it's beyond devastating. And it's just almost ironic, right? That 1 month before, the government hosts this event and we're all excited about, tackling light pollution in the island. And then the entire island pretty much goes dark. And people are dying and people are sick. I don't think I have time. Well, I'm just gonna start it, but I'm not gonna share the whole thing because I wanna finish up for the other speakers. But later you can share and you'll see what we went through. Just let it go through. By the way, this area here, Caguas, that's where my family lives. Yeah. I'm just gonna go back to this. about that. Hold on. Yeah, so I'll share that afterwards so you can see it. 1 year later, I go and visit Puerto Rico. And we're 3 years later, and it's still pretty similar. And so I'm using that as an example to the realization that, here we are moving this light pollution, and there's all these other issues that the community struggles with that are even more important. The office that I have within Sierra Club happens to be in the middle of areas that are actually fairly nicely dark, but it's also a very poor community. It's a rural community that back in 1928, in another hurricane, lost thousands of lives, most of which were Black farm workers. That community still lives with that fear of the Lake Okeechobee dikes breaking and flooding them again. And because of that fear, they have a lot of resistance to environmental groups, especially those that are trying to acquire lands to do more Everglades restoration. So we open our office right in the middle of this community, and right next to a laundromat, and right next to very tiny little pharmacy, and another house that is literally people who don't even have air conditioning, and they also happen to have some of the darkest skies in the area, but there's so many injustices out there. So when we think of movement building, we think about, again, the concept that movements, unlike things such as, campaigns, say, for example, your campaign to try to pass the law in the state of Massachusetts to deal with night sky, or whether it's in a town or whatever it is, you have these things that you work for in order to achieve that goal. But they're incremental things, right? Whereas movement is really about transforming. It's basically, and this is why I love this picture, because it's a way of thinking about transforming a society to get to the point where, like, everybody embraces this common goal, for example, of protecting the night sky and seeing this shared heritage and being more involved. And as a result, it is more than just about transactions, about an ordinance here, showing a movie night over there, but it's really helping to change the paradigm of how people have this relationship, or restore this old relationship with the night sky. And it hopefully leads us to a moment where we just can't think of a time, when we will want to go back to something different. And I think this is my last slide. This is basically a very beautiful moment that I got to share at a conference event. I think it was like 2 or 3 years ago. You see us all with the, Panda Forever kind of thing. And these are all people who are involved in this movement building timeframe. In this particular case, this was a conference by people of color. It was called the People of the Global Majority. And the reason why we like to use that term is because, in fact, if you were to look at the demographics of the entire world, people of color, in fact, make up the global majority. So we're there talking about how do we improve equitable access to nature to our communities. And these are the things, I'm using all those things kind of as a demonstration. I think I can stop sharing my screen now. I don't know how to stop sharing. Okay, stop sharing. Okay. To really bring into mind that, the importance of really going beyond just what you as a group, associated with IDA, think about all the other associations that you have with, other things that you care about, and figure it out, how instead of just, making a difference for this one thing, this one campaign, how can you contribute to this much bigger movement towards both social and environmental justice, which in itself needs to include light pollution, as well as access to beneficial good lighting. I saw that Nicole, I think you were on the call that I was the other day with Charles Fulco, if I'm not mistaken. I think I recognize your voice. I don't know if she's still in there or not. Yeah, she said she was. Yeah. Um, 14 years old, if I recall right, you told me. And all I can tell you is that people like her is what really energizes the heck out of me. Because I really think that you take a bunch of people like her, her age, you know how you mentioned that you have these committee hearings, people speak, bring a bunch of kids, bring them. Don't tell them what to say, let them do it on their own. And it is amazing how much more attention they will get. And there's no better proof of that than you look at what Greta, with one tiny little sign, you know, did and helped to mobilize kids around the entire globe. And it's a long process, but to me, movement building, is where we need to start thinking of versus just concentrating on just the mission of one organization and just use the organization as a way to move the bigger movement. So I'm done.
Thank you, Diana. That was beautiful. Thank you.
Okay.
That was a really inspiring and sweeping talk and presentation, Deanna, and it touching as it does on everything from Black Lives Matter to social justice writ large and the connections to the environmental movement. We appreciate that message very much. It resonates with a lot of what we're trying to do here in Massachusetts, in the big cities and the rural areas of the state. So thank you. Deanna, I'm sure that you have questions, but we're behind schedule. So let me propose the following: that we actually move on to our next talk, but that people who have questions put them in the chat. And if Deanna, if you wouldn't mind monitoring the chat and actually responding to the chat, then we can all see that happening. Does that sound good to people? Okay, great. Thank you so much, Deanna.